It was an ordinary evening in Brookfield, Illinois. The Dawson family was safe inside their warm, well-lit home, laughing over bedtime stories and school projects. Outside, the streets were quiet, the kind of stillness small towns are known for. And then, someone rang the doorbell. It was a familiar face, a neighbor they'd waved to countless times, but within minutes of opening that door, every single member of the Dawson family would be dead. What would make a man you've known for years, someone who shared small talk at the mailbox and borrowed tools from your garage, walk into your home and end your life? This is the story of Peter Harris, the quiet neighbor with a polite smile, who hid a darkness so deep that no one saw it coming. Tonight, we retrace the final moments of the Dawson family, the clues that were missed, and the terrifying truth about how danger can live just 2 doors away and still knock politely before it strikes. It was just past 8:15 p.m. on a quiet Wednesday evening in the small town of Brookfield, Illinois. The street lamps had just flickered on, painting long shadows across Maple Avenue. Inside the Dawson household, laughter filled the living room. Emma Dawson, a mother of 2, was reading aloud from a children's book, while her husband Mark helped their daughter assemble a school project. Their 8-year-old son was sprawled on the carpet, building with toy blocks. It was an ordinary night, until the sound of the doorbell sliced through the moment. Mark got up to answer it, expecting maybe a delivery or a neighbor borrowing sugar. But when he opened the door, he was surprised to see Peter Harris, the man from 2 houses down. Peter had lived in the neighborhood for 6 years, a quiet, solitary man in his late 40s. He gave a faint smile, the kind that didn't quite reach his eyes. "Hey Mark, mind if I come in for a minute? Need to talk." His voice was calm, but there was something off, something tense, about the way his hands gripped the strap of the bag slung over his shoulder. Mark hesitated. They weren't close friends, but in a small town, you don't turn a neighbor away at your door. "Sure, come in," Mark said, stepping aside. Peter walked in, glancing briefly toward the children before settling on the couch. Emma smiled politely, offering him tea. But Peter shook his head, leaning forward with his elbows on his knees. "It's been a rough week," he said quietly. "You ever get the feeling people are talking about you?" Emma and Mark exchanged a look. They knew Peter kept to himself, but they hadn't heard of any trouble. Mark tried to reassure him, telling him people in Brookfield weren't like that. But Peter's eyes didn't soften. He kept darting glances toward the windows, as if checking whether someone was watching. The conversation turned uneasy. Peter began speaking in short bursts, muttering about neighbors who pretend to be kind and smiles that hide knives. Emma excused herself to take the kids upstairs, sensing the tension. But before she could guide them toward the staircase, Peter stood abruptly. From his bag, he pulled out a black revolver. Everything stopped. Mark's voice was steady but low. "Peter, what are you doing?" The children froze, eyes wide. Peter's expression was unreadable. "I need to make it stop," he whispered. "They can't keep doing this to me." In the next seconds, chaos erupted. Mark lunged forward, trying to grab Peter's arm. A shot rang out, shattering the quiet of Maple Avenue. Neighbors later told police they thought it was fireworks, but inside the Dawson home, the sound was deafening. Emma screamed, pushing the children toward the stairs. Another shot, then another. By the time the police arrived, just 6 minutes after the first 911 call, the house was eerily silent. The front door hung open, swaying gently in the breeze. The Dawsons were gone. The investigation that followed shook Brookfield to its core. Officers found Peter Harris sitting on his front porch, gun resting on his lap, staring into the distance. He didn't resist arrest. When asked why he did it, his answer was chilling. "They were laughing at me. They all do." As detectives pieced together Peter's past, a disturbing picture emerged. He had worked as an electrical engineer until being laid off 2 years prior. Since then, his behavior had grown increasingly erratic. He believed neighbors were spying on him, manipulating his mail, and even listening through the walls. Mental health professionals later determined he suffered from untreated paranoid schizophrenia, but no one in the neighborhood had seen the full extent. Until it was too late. Police interviews revealed that Peter had spent the previous week writing in a notebook, cataloging imagined offenses committed by neighbors. The Dawsons topped his list, though there was no evidence they had ever wronged him. Investigators also discovered that the revolver he used had been purchased legally just 2 weeks earlier. At the Dawsons' funeral, hundreds from Brookfield and neighboring towns gathered. The sight of 2 small coffins being lowered into the ground left even seasoned officers in tears. Friends described Emma as warm-hearted and generous, the kind of woman who baked extra cookies for neighborhood kids. Mark was remembered as a steady, patient man who coached Little League and volunteered at the local library. The loss of their children was beyond words. In court, Peter sat motionless, his gaze fixed somewhere far away. Family members of the victims gave emotional statements. "You rang their doorbell," Emma's sister said through tears. "You looked them in the eye before you destroyed everything. I hope you remember that every single day." Peter was found guilty on 4 counts of first-degree murder and sentenced to life without parole. The judge noted the premeditation in his actions, the calm approach, the concealed weapon, the fact that he chose to ring the doorbell instead of breaking in. "This was not a moment of uncontrollable rage," the judge said. "This was a deliberate act." For the residents of Brookfield, the case left a scar that would never fully heal. People began locking their doors earlier, avoiding unnecessary small talk with strangers. The simple act of answering the door no longer felt harmless. Parents told their children not to open for anyone, even familiar faces. Experts who studied the case pointed out the red flags that had gone unnoticed: the social withdrawal, the paranoid comments to acquaintances, the sudden weapon purchase. "This tragedy could have been prevented," said Dr. Helen Carter, a forensic psychologist. "But we often underestimate the danger posed by untreated mental illness, especially when the person hides it behind polite small talk until the very last moment." In the years since the murders, the Dawson home has remained empty. The grass grows wild in the front yard, and the windows stay dark. Realtors have tried to sell it, but potential buyers always back out, claiming the house feels too heavy. On quiet nights, some neighbors swear they hear the faint echo of a doorbell, though they know it's only their imagination. The story of Peter Harris and the Dawson family is a grim reminder that evil doesn't always arrive kicking down the door. Sometimes it rings the bell, smiles politely, and steps inside. In the weeks after the murders, reporters camped outside the courthouse, hoping to capture a glimpse of the man who had shattered a family and a community. But Peter rarely spoke, and when he did, it was fragmented. Half sentences about messages in the mail and faces at the window. Prosecutors revealed that Peter had walked to the Dawson home with a plan that night, tucking the revolver into his bag alongside a small notepad. Inside that notepad, detectives found a list of names, neighbors, store clerks, even a mail carrier, each with scribbled accusations that made no sense to anyone but him. One chilling detail emerged during the trial. Before pulling the trigger, Peter had stood in the Dawsons' living room for almost 10 minutes, talking calmly, asking about their kids' school, even complimenting the new paint color on their walls. It was as if he wanted them to feel at ease before the horror began. That revelation stunned jurors who struggled to understand how someone could switch from small talk to violence so quickly. The Dawsons' relatives pushed for answers, but there were few to give. "You can spend your life asking why," said Detective Raul Mendez, who led the investigation. "But in cases like this, the answer won't make sense. You're trying to apply logic to something that was born out of delusion." In the months following Peter's sentencing, Brookfield introduced a new community safety program, encouraging residents to report signs of severe distress or unusual behavior, even if it felt uncomfortable. Town meetings were filled with debates over privacy and intervention. But for those who had known the Dawsons, the cost of inaction was carved into their hearts. Emma's parents moved away from Brookfield, unable to bear the daily reminders. Mark's younger brother stayed behind, becoming a vocal advocate for mental health outreach. "I don't care if people think it's intrusive," he told a local news crew. "If we see someone slipping through the cracks, we have to step in. My brother, my sister-in-law, my niece, and my nephew might still be alive if someone had." The case gained national attention, sparking discussions on talk shows and crime documentaries. One segment, aired by a popular investigative program, reconstructed the night of the murders minute by minute. Watching an actor ring a doorbell, smile faintly, and step into a warm, unsuspecting home sent shivers down the spines of viewers across the country. Over time, the phrase "doorbell murders" became shorthand in Brookfield for the kind of evil that hides behind normalcy. Parents warned their children about strangers, but now they also warned about the neighbor who might wave every morning, yet harbor darkness no one could see. And so, Maple Avenue changed forever. The sound of a doorbell in the stillness of the night no longer meant a friendly visit or a borrowed cup of sugar. It meant caution, hesitation, and a glance through the peephole to make sure the smile on the other side wasn't hiding something deadly. The Dawson murders left Brookfield with scars that may never fade. The grass in front of their house grows wild now, untouched for years. Neighbors still avoid walking past at night, as if the air itself remembers what happened there. The scariest part isn't that Peter Harris was dangerous, it's that for years he looked harmless. Evil doesn't always break in through a window. Sometimes it rings the doorbell, smiles, and waits for you to let it in.